Hi guys, welcome back to Pro Studio Live and welcome to the Pro Tools Authority class. Last week, we finished talking about the basics of Boom and Structure Free. We also discussed how to record MIDI in Pro Tools and went into a more detailed discussion of how to work with MIDI data and clips. We also covered some of the different views when it comes to MIDI and then returned to the details of navigating, selecting, and working in Pro Tools. We left off talking about the link, track, and edit selection option in Pro Tools, so let's start by clarifying a few other things about that option. Now, if you remember, the button for link, track, and edit selection looks like a hamburger icon next to two parallel vertical lines with a dot to either side, and it's located below your scrub tool. So I'm just going to wave my mouse around that button right now so you can see it. It's this button right here. And if link, track, and edit selection is active and your track selection is linked to your edit selection, then this button will be blue like it is for me right now. And you can click on it to toggle the link, track, and edit selection option on and off. So I'll just show you that. You just simply click on it and it'll go from gray to blue. So you can use this link, track, and edit selection option to modify your playlist selections. So for example, you can copy a playlist selection or edit selection to other tracks using the link, track, and edit selection option. Just make sure the option is enabled by clicking to highlight in blue the link, track, and edit selection button, which again is below the scrub tool, and it's the button with that hamburger icon and parallel lines icon. Then you just make an edit selection on a track using your selector or your grabber tool. So I'm just going to make a quick selection here to show you. Then you can select a track or tracks to add that same selection to those tracks. To highlight a bunch of tracks next to each other, click on the nameplate for the track at one end of the range of tracks that you want to highlight, and then hold the Shift key. And then click on the nameplate for the track on the other end of the range of tracks that you want to highlight. So I can show you that really quickly. So I've clicked on this one. I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm just going to click Audio 3, and it's going to highlight the range from Audio 1 to Audio 3 here. And you can see that my edit selection followed that track selection. So this will add your edit or playlist selection to all of the selected tracks. Or you can select tracks that are non-adjacent to each other by clicking on one track nameplate, then holding the Command or Control if you're on a Windows machine button, and then click on the nameplates for any other tracks that you'd like to highlight. So I'm just going to add a track here to my group of tracks that are highlighted. So I'm going to do this MIDI track here, and I'm just going to hold Command and then click on that nameplate, and it adds that edit selection to that track. So you can then remove your edit selection from a highlighted track, but keep the edit selection on other selected tracks by holding Command on a Mac or Control on a Windows machine and click on the track nameplate for the track that you want to no longer have the edit selection. So I can show you that right now. So I'm just going to hold Command and I'm going to click on Audio 4 because it's right in the middle of things, so you can see it lose that edit selection right there. So another thing you can do is you can move the selection to a completely different track by clicking on the track nameplate for whatever track you want to now have your selection. And you don't have to hold any modifier keys for this. This is just how it works. So I'm going to click on this Instrument 2 track here. And you'll notice that my edit selection moved to just this track and none of the other ones. Okay, so that wraps up the link, track, and edit selection option. Let's move on to discussing the tab key in Pro Tools. So the tab key is pretty useful for moving about in your session's track playlists. It will quickly and efficiently bring your cursor to clip boundaries, and all you have to do is press the tab key and your edit cursor will move to the next clip boundary to the right of the cursor's current location. So let's watch that happen. So right now my cursor's right here. So I'm going to hit the tab key and it moves my cursor to this clip boundary right here. I can drag this out a little bigger so you can see it a little more easily. I'm going to hit tab and it's going to move to the next clip boundary, and I hit tab again and it'll move to the next clip boundary over here, and so on. So you can also reverse the direction of the edit cursor by holding Option on a Mac or Control if you're on a Windows machine, and then you press the Tab key. So this will make the cursor move to the previous clip boundary to the left of the cursor's current location. So most things in Pro Tools, you hold Option and it kind of reverses the flow of that function to some extent. So I'm just going to hold Option here, and now I'm going to hit Tab, and you'll see my cursor move back. So just move back to this point between the two clips here. I'm going to hold Option again, and it moves back to the next clip boundary, and so on through your session. So anyway, you can keep pressing the Tab key in either of these situations, both moving to the right with the Tab key or to the left with Option and Tab, to make the cursor move to the next successive clip boundary. So you might be wondering how this can be practically applied in a studio situation, and I find it very useful for doing things like highlighting clips or making a selection quickly. So keyboard shortcuts tend to be faster and more efficient, and they definitely impress clients. So I like to use them whenever possible. If you want a selection to begin and end on a precise clip boundary, this function is very useful. All you have to do is make your desired selection by clicking near the start point of your clip boundary, preferably to the left of the start point if you don't want to use that Option key, and then press Tab to bring the cursor to that desired start point clip boundary. So I will show you that really quickly. I can just click here, and then I hit Tab, and it brings me to this point, which is where I want to start my highlight. And then I'm going to want to end my highlight over here at the next clip boundary, just for the sake of this demonstration. Let's say I want to highlight this clip. So again, I just click here, hit Tab to get to that first clip boundary. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to press Tab again until the end of my highlighted section arrives at the clip boundary that I want. So for me, it's just going to be once because I just want to highlight that one section. But if you wanted to highlight multiple clips, you could do that too. So I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to hit Tab, and it just highlights to the next clip boundary, which is what I want in this case. I just want that one. But if I wanted to go to the end of the next clip, I could hold Shift and hit Tab again, and it would bring me further. So you can also use this technique to highlight a section with a cursor starting position that's not a clip boundary. To do that, just drop your cursor at the desired position, so anywhere, not necessarily a clip boundary, right? And then hold Shift and hit Tab to highlight from that point to the next clip boundary to the right of your edit cursor. So this might be pretty intuitive to you guys, but I could click here and I could hold Shift and hit Tab, and it'd bring me to that point if I wanted to, and on to the next. Each time I hit Tab while holding Shift, it will highlight further to the next clip boundary. So again, you can just keep hitting Tab to continue to extend that highlight to your next clip boundary. Or you can drop your cursor anywhere and then hold the Option or Control key if you're on a Windows machine, and hold Shift and then hit Tab. So I'll show you that really quickly. So I'm going to drop my cursor right here, and I'm going to hold Option and then Shift. So Option reverses it, right? And then I hold Shift to highlight from one region to another, and then I hit Tab, and it brings me to that previous clip boundary. And then if I hit Tab again while still holding Option and Shift, it will highlight again to the next one, and so on. So this will highlight from your chosen cursor location to the nearest clip boundary that's to the left of the cursor location. So basically holding Option will reverse the direction of the action, and this is a common function. Again, this is a common function for the Option key or the Control key if you're in Windows. It will often reverse whatever you're doing in some way in Pro Tools. So another thing to note is that the Tab key is what is called a repeater key. So this means that if you hold down the Tab key, it will not just be as if you hit the Tab key once. It will be as if you're hitting the Tab key repeatedly and quickly, and your selection will tab rapidly from one clip boundary to the next, and you'll be at the edge of your session before you know it. So just be aware of that. Okay, so Tab brings you to the next clip boundary unless you have Tab to Transients option enabled, the Tab to Transients option. So now your transients in your audio are peaks in your audio. They're usually the burst of high amplitude waveform that you'll see at the beginning of a sound or a note. The Tab to Transient function is therefore really useful if you're trying to figure out a precise starting point for a sound or a note. So to use tab to transients, just click on the tab to transients toggle button in your edit window toolbar. When the button is highlighted in blue, tab to transients is active. Now the tab to transients button is found just below and slightly to the left of the trim tool, and it looks like an arrow pointing at a waveform icon. So it is this button right here with that little arrow on the left and the little waveform icon on the right. That's the tab to transients button. So once you're in tab to transients mode, you simply press the tab key and your cursor will jump to the nearest transient to the right of the cursor's current location. So I can show you that really quickly. Let's see. I'm going to hit this button to get into that point. And I'm going to zoom in a little so you can see more easily. So I'm going to drop my cursor here and I'm just going to hit the tab key and it's going to bring me to the closest transient. So that is right here, right now. So tab in this mode works a lot like the normal tab functions, except it will move to the nearest transient instead of the nearest clip boundary. So if you want the cursor to travel backwards to the nearest transient, you simply hold Option on a Mac or Control on a Windows machine, and then you press the tab key. So I can show you that really quickly. So my cursor's right here, right now. I'm just going to hold Option, and I'm going to hit tab. It's going to move back to the nearest transient as I go. So you can see it's moving. This is a pretty percussive track that I'm looking at. You can zoom in a little so you can see it a little bit better. But Option tab, and it brings you to the previous transient. Now, Pro Tools has a threshold value that it uses to determine what exactly a transient is, and you can't adjust that as the user. So you kind of have to accept and deal with whatever it deems to be a transient. And just like the normal tab key function, you can make selections using these keyboard shortcuts. So with tab to transients, it's easy to make a selection from one point to the start or end of a noise or sound. So to do that, you simply place your cursor in the desired location on your session, and then you're going to hold Shift and press Tab to highlight from that location to the nearest transient to the right. So it's very similar to what we just looked at with the normal tab function, right? So I'm going to drop my cursor here. I'm going to hold Shift and hit Tab, and it's just going to bring me to the nearest transient. So I can easily highlight a sound. Or you can drop your edit cursor in the desired location and then hold Option and Shift or Control and Shift if you're on a Windows machine and press Tab. And this will highlight from your cursor's current location to the nearest transient to its left. So let's look at that really quickly. So I'm going to drop over here. I'm going to do Option to reverse and then Shift to make it highlight instead of just move. And then I'm going to hit Tab and it'll move to the nearest transient. I'm just keep hitting Tab to highlight more of that space. Okay, so that's tab to transients, and you can return to regular tab functions by clicking the tab to transients button again to make it so that it's not highlighted blue. Or you can toggle tab to transients on and off by holding Command and Option and pressing Tab if you're on a Mac, or holding Control Alt and pressing Tab if you're on a Windows computer. So I'm just going to toggle it using that Command Option Tab to show you that. So Command Option Tab. And you see how that button is now not highlighted. So we're not in tab to transients mode. Okay, so now let's talk about some of your session view options. There are so many ways you can customize how you view your session in Pro Tools. For example, you can change your track heights individually, you can change your track order, track colors, zoom levels, and you can even create zoom presets. So let's start by talking about your track size, or rather track height. You have a handful of track height options. So the smallest is called micro, and from there we have mini, small, medium, large, jumbo, extreme, and fit to window. You'll find that the taller track heights are really useful if you're doing detailed editing work and want to really be able to see what you're doing. And the smaller track heights can be useful too because they conserve space within your screen, which can make it easier to work or mix in a larger session with a lot of tracks. So anyway, you can adjust the track height by making sure you're in the edit window and then hovering your mouse at the head of the desired track at the boundary between the desired track and the track below it. So you should notice that the cursor will convert to a double-sided arrow, and then you can simply click and hold your click and then drag the mouse to adjust the track height. So I'll show you that really quickly. It's really simple. So what we're going to do is we're just going to hover at this point between the two tracks and see how it's this double-sided arrow here. And I just click and drag and it'll pull that track taller or shorter. So, and I can do it with any type of track, audio, MIDI, so on. So there's also a track height selector button that's towards the top left of the track header in the edit window. And it's a small circular button with a small arrow pointing down. And you can also click on that to select a specific track height. So that works a little bit differently. I'll show you how it works. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on that little arrow. I don't know if you guys can see it. Hopefully you can. And it gives us the different track height options. So I just clicked on this little arrow on the top left, and I can just jump from jumbo here, which is what I'm in, to mini, and it shrinks that track. Or I can jump, nope, now it's too small. Or I can jump to extreme and make it a lot taller. So another thing we can do is we can adjust the track height by clicking on what is called the amplitude scale area of the track. And it's the gray area that's between the track playlist area and the track header area. And it has markings on it that look like a ruler. So you click on that and a drop down will, with your track height options, will appear. So I can show you that. So it's this gray area right here. This track is really tall. Let's see. We can make it a little bit shorter. So we're going to do medium right now. So I just clicked on that gray area and I can select the different sizes. So it's pretty simple. Now, you'll notice that when you make a track very short, some options in the track header area will disappear or they'll become smaller due to the amount of room available on the track header. So if these options are available in the mix window, you'll still be able to access and use them there, even if your track height is extremely small in the edit window. Now, if you're adjusting a track height by clicking and dragging at the boundaries between two tracks, you can also hold Command or Control on a Windows computer while you're making your adjustments, and the height will change continuously, not incrementally like it usually does. So you just hover your mouse at the boundary until it becomes that double-sided arrow that we saw before, and then you're going to click, and then you're going to hold down Command and drag to adjust the height. So you'll notice when I do it without holding down Command, it kind of jumps, right? So it's jumping between preset options. So I'm going to click and then hold Command, and now it's a smooth height transition. So that's just another trick you can do. You can also hold Option while adjusting track height to make all of the tracks within your session the same height as the one you're setting. So this is something that I use pretty often, Option, right? So we're going to hold Option, and I'm going to adjust this height, and you can see all the tracks are adjusting as I'm dragging the mouse for this one track's height. So that's an easy way to quickly make everything bigger, everything smaller, and then go from there with your workflow. Another thing you can do is if you select the nameplates for multiple tracks and then you hold Option and Shift and then you adjust the track height, then all of the selected tracks will become that height. So that's a good way to adjust the height of specific tracks and not every single track in your session. So I'm going to hold Option and Shift. I'm going to, you know what? I have to highlight a few tracks first. So I'm going to highlight these 3 tracks. I'm going to do Option and then Shift, and then I'm going to hover till I get that double arrow here. And then I'm going to click and drag and see how it's making just those 3 bigger. And I can make them smaller. So that's all we have for segment 1 of this episode. But when we get back, we will discuss track order and some more details of zooming in Pro Tools.